That was thanks to dear Sebi. He went to America, he wins the Masters, he won the Masters at 23. And so when we all went to Augusta, because for European guys to win Augusta doesn't make sense. It's super fast, and yet we went there and somehow we managed to dominate the Masters. Tiger, as we know, he's gone backwards in many ways. He's still dealing with the golf swing, his love for the game of golf. Obviously, still stuff, what happened off the golf course.
When Tiger Woods once called Nick Faldo the first scientist in golf, the legends who came before him did not exactly cheer. They watched as Faldo stripped away everything they loved about the game and replaced it with cold efficiency. These men did not just lose to Nick Faldo, they envied him. That envy cut deeper than any defeat because the game they loved was being perfected by a man who made it boring. The 1996 Masters stands as the ultimate symbol of this jealousy. Greg Norman held a 6-shot lead going into Sunday. The world expected a coronation. Instead, they witnessed Norman disintegrate while Faldo marched forward with surgical precision, shooting a 67 to win by 5 strokes. Norman's collapse was not just a loss, it was a public demonstration that the charismatic athlete, no matter how talented, could not defeat the cold engineer. If you are loving how this story is unfolding, drop some hype for the video. It really helps us tell more of these hidden rivalries. But Faldo was not always this machine. In the early 1980s, he was one of them. Fragile, human, beatable. The British press nicknamed him Nick Faldo because he buckled under pressure. Then came the 1983 Open Championship at Royal Birkdale. Faldo was in contention, and his swing fell apart. He realized his entire game was built on timing, a variable that vanished when adrenaline flooded his system. Most players would have accepted this. Faldo refused. He made a decision that seemed insane. He would completely dismantle his swing and rebuild it from scratch with David Ledbetter. The golf world mocked him. Players did not hire swing gurus, but Faldo did not care about tradition. For 2 years, he hit between 500 and 800 balls every day until his hands bled. He studied his swing frame by frame. He eliminated every element that relied on timing or feel. When Faldo emerged in 1987 to win the Open Championship at Muirfield, playing 18 consecutive pars in the final round, the ridicule stopped. It was replaced by shock, and eventually by a quiet, simmering jealousy. His peers realized that Faldo had solved the puzzle they were still trying to guess. Greg Norman was everything Faldo was not. The Shark was charismatic, powerful, aggressive. He spent 331 weeks at world number 1, a testament to his overwhelming physical talent. Norman's swing was a violent, beautiful thing, characterized by immense lag, fast tempo, and heavy reliance on hand timing to square the club face at impact. On Thursday through Saturday, when pressure was low, this swing produced spectacular scoring. But on Sunday, when nerves kicked in, Norman's swing betrayed him. Physiological arousal causes grip pressure to tighten and tempo to quicken. For a timing-based player like Norman, this is catastrophic. Jack Nicklaus once pointed this out to Norman, telling him his grip pressure would alter his club face control when it mattered most. Faldo had eliminated this problem entirely. By rebuilding his swing to be powered by the large muscles of his torso and maintaining what coaches called a dead-handed pass through the ball, Faldo created a swing that was immune to nerves. His big muscles absorbed the adrenaline that destroyed Norman. It was boring. Norman himself said as much. But boring meant unbreakable. And that is what Norman envied most. He envied the luxury of being boring on a Sunday at Augusta because boring meant total control. Norman's swing was a lottery ticket. Faldo's swing was an annuity that paid out every single time. The 1996 Masters exposed this contrast in the cruelest way possible. Norman entered Sunday with a 6-shot lead. Then his timing deserted him. Hooks off the tee, blocks into the trees, chunked chips around the green. Every mistake a timing-based player makes under extreme pressure, Norman made that day. Meanwhile, Faldo played a round of relentless, suffocating efficiency. He did not do anything spectacular. He simply hit fairways and greens, made his putts, and let Norman destroy himself. In the aftermath, Norman publicly maintained his dignity. He praised Faldo's efficiency, but in later years his comments about boring players and boring commentary betrayed a lingering resentment. Norman envied the man who had engineered his way out of the human experience of choking. He envied the peace that came with knowing your swing would not betray you when your hands were shaking. Norman was the tragic hero, beloved for his collapses. Faldo was the closer, envied for his victories. Norman generated sympathy. Faldo generated jealousy. And deep down, Norman wished he could trade his charisma for Faldo's cold certainty. Gary Player built his entire career on the mantra that the harder you work, the luckier bulkier you get. He was the original fitness fanatic, doing fingertip push-ups and traveling millions of miles to compete. Player was golf's ultimate grinder, maximizing his limited physical frame through sheer will. For Gary Player to be awestruck by another golfer's discipline is like a monk being impressed by another's asceticism. Yet Player is on record stating that Faldo possessed a work ethic that was quite unbelievable. This admission reveals the nature of Player's envy. It was envy of the purity and volume of Faldo's obsession. While Player worked on fitness, bunker play, and globe-trotting ambassadorship, Faldo's obsession was singular: the full swing. Reports from David Ledbetter confirmed that during the rebuilding years, Faldo would hit between 500 and 800 balls a day, every day, often until his hands bled or blistered. This was not practice. It was monastic devotion. Player envied this single-mindedness because he understood the sacrifice it required. Player was a global ambassador, a family man, and a showman. He balanced his career with life. Faldo, during his prime, was a recluse. He sacrificed social capital, friendships, and popularity for the purity of the strike. Player had maximized his effort within the boundaries of a balanced life. Faldo had taken the Player doctrine to a fanatical extreme that even Player himself might not have been willing to endure. But the deeper envy was about ownership. In golf, there is a difference between renting a swing and owning a swing. Renting a swing means playing well for a week based on tempo and feel. Owning a swing means understanding its geometry so deeply that it cannot fail. Player noted that Faldo owned his swing in a way few ever have. This ownership meant Faldo did not need luck or timing the way others did. Player, who had spent his career outworking everyone, realized that Faldo had outworked him in the one area that mattered most: the mechanics of the swing itself. And what made it worse was Faldo's inability to be satisfied. Even after winning majors, Faldo would go straight to the range to fix a minor imperfection. Player was driven by a desire to beat the Americans. Faldo was driven by an internal standard of perfection that rendered the competition secondary. Player envied the peace that came with that ownership. Curtis Strange was a fighter. The intense Virginian who won back-to-back U.S. Opens in 1988 and 1989 was a grinder who wore his emotions on his sleeve, battling his own nerves as fiercely as he battled the course. Strange's rivalry with Faldo revealed a deep envy of something Strange could never achieve: Faldo's psychological detachment. Strange specifically cited Faldo's folded arm stance and icy stare as intimidating factors. This was not just an observation of posture, it was an admission that Faldo had weaponized silence. When Strange looked at Faldo on the first tee, he did not see a fellow competitor struggling with the same doubts. He saw a machine waiting for them to fail. This projection of inevitability is psychologically devastating in a sport where self-doubt is the primary adversary. Strange admitted that everyone chokes, that you are not human if you have not. By appearing inhuman, Faldo forced his opponents to confront their own humanity. Strange envied the ability to dissociate, to stand on a tee box with arms folded, conserving every ounce of energy for the next swing. Strange burned energy pumping fists, cursing, grinding through every shot. Faldo stood silent, practicing what Strange called emotional economy. The 1988 U.S. Open playoff at the Country Club was a definitive moment. Strange won, but the battle cemented his respect and wariness of Faldo. Strange's envy was essentially an envy of peace. The grinder is always at war with the game. Faldo, through his robotic routine, made the game look peaceful even when the stakes were highest. Strange knew the internal cost of his own victories. He looked at Faldo and wondered if it was possible to win without the internal torture. Faldo seemed to have found a way to turn off the part of his brain that caused suffering. And for a man like Strange, who defined himself by his ability to endure suffering, that was the ultimate luxury. The relationship between Seve Ballesteros and Nick Faldo is the most complex and tragic of all these rivalries. Seve was the artist, the genius of feel who could conjure miracles from the trees. Faldo was the engineer, who hit fairways and greens with monotonous regularity. They were teammates in the Ryder Cup, rivals in majors, and polar opposites in philosophy. Seve's envy of Faldo was the envy of the magician for the mathematician. Seve had witnessed Faldo's transformation firsthand. He knew Nick Faldo, the player who buckled under pressure in the early 1980s. He watched Faldo strip his game down and rebuild it with Ledbetter. Seve, who struggled immensely with his own driver throughout his career, must have looked at Faldo's rebuild with a mixture of admiration and resentment. Quotes attributed to Sev and his camp often use the term machine or robot as a pejorative. But in the context of professional sport, calling an opponent a machine is the highest form of jealous praise. It implies they cannot be broken. Sev famously said he preferred Jose Maria Olazabal's swing to Faldo's, claiming he felt no envy. But But the psychological subtext is clear. Seve spent the 1990s searching desperately for a swing that would not hurt his back and would keep the ball in play, while Faldo continued to win majors with the very mechanical reliability Seve publicly dismissed. Seve's genius was recovery. His ability to escape trouble with imaginative shots made him beloved. But recovery shots are only necessary when you have made a mistake. Faldo did not need to be Sev because he did not miss the fairway. While they formed a legendary Ryder Cup partnership, the friction was palpable. Seve wanted to win with flair. Faldo wanted to win with geometry. As Seve's game declined due to the physical toll of his violent swing and chronic back issues, he watched Faldo's body-friendly, controlled swing allow him to remain competitive deep into his career. The jealousy Faldo later referenced regarding his peers was likely centered on this realization. While the artist is loved, the machine lasts longer. Seve's career was a firework, brilliant and brief. Faldo's career was a factory producing consistent results year after year. Seve envied the man who had traded magic for longevity. But the story of envy does not end with resentment. It ends with validation. The younger generation, led by Tiger Woods, did not resent Nick Faldo. They studied him. Tiger Woods did not harbor the bitter jealousy of a contemporary rival. Instead, he validated the very things Norman, Player, Strange, and Seve had resented. Woods effectively inherited and perfected the modern pro blueprint that Faldo pioneered. Before Faldo, golf was often treated as a pastime played by professionals. Faldo introduced the entourage, the swing coach, the sports psychologist, the dietary strictness, the gym regimen. Tiger Woods took this model and added explosive athleticism. Woods acknowledged that Faldo was the first to treat golf like a precise science. Woods' blueprint for the Masters, conservative targets, aggressive swings, destroying the par fives, was essentially the Faldo strategy with more horsepower. When Woods won the 1997 Masters, he dismantled the field with a mix of power and the kind of boring consistency Faldo had championed. Woods' respect for Faldo serves as a retrospective validation of the methods that Norman, Player, Strange, and Seve had envied. By adopting the Faldo blueprint, Woods proved that the robotic approach was superior to the instinct approach of the Palmer and Norman era. The envy of the older legends was rooted in the realization that their era, the era of the swashbuckling shotmaker, was being ended not just by Faldo, but by the new breed of golfer Faldo helped create. The secret jealousy of golf legends toward Nick Faldo was never about his trophy count. It was about the existential threat his methods posed to their identities. Greg Norman was the ultimate athlete, yet he was beaten by the ultimate engineer. He envied the structural integrity of Faldo's game that stood firm when his own collapsed. Gary Player was the ultimate worker, yet he was outworked by the ultimate perfectionist. He envied the scientific direction of Faldo's labor. Curtis Strange was the ultimate fighter, yet he was intimidated by the ultimate stoic. He envied the emotional economy of Faldo's detachment. Seve Ballesteros was the ultimate artist, yet he was outlasted by the ultimate machine. He envied the reliability that rendered artistic recovery unnecessary. Nick Faldo was not the most talented player of his generation, nor the most charismatic, but he was the most designed. He built a game that removed the element of human frailty that makes golf so brutally difficult. He engineered certainty in a sport defined by chaos. His peers envied him because, in the heat of battle, when their hands were shaking and their minds were racing, they looked at Nick Faldo and saw a man who had engineered his way out of the ability to feel fear. They envied him because he made the hardest game in the world look boring, and they knew that boring was just another word for perfect. In stripping away the romance of golf, Faldo had discovered something his peers could never admit. Perfection is not passionate. It is not artistic. It is not emotional. Perfection is cold, methodical, and utterly boring. And despite all their resentment, they knew his blueprint would outlive their brilliance. That was the price of perfection. It demanded envy itself.